The old wooden porch groaned beneath her frail, trembling feet as Margaret Hill stood frozen, staring at the locked door of her once beloved home. 50 years of laughter, love, and memories, the little white house with blue shutters, were now trapped behind glass and steel, controlled by strangers who didn't care who she was. Her hands shook violently, clutching a worn photograph of her late husband, Robert. She pressed the image against her chest as tears slid down her weathered cheeks. "Please, it's my home," she whispered to the indifferent walls. A cruel laugh answered her. One young man sneered through the window, calling her "Grandma" in a tone dripping with mockery. The police had shrugged when she tried to fight back, citing squatters' rights while her heart fractured further. Margaret had nowhere to turn. The town of Willow Creek, once vibrant with memories, now felt cold and unwelcoming. Then, through the morning mist, the unmistakable growl of motorcycle engines rolled down the street. Chrome glinted, engines roared, and 6 men in leather vests pulled up in front of her home. Their leader, Jack "Bear" Dalton, Robert's oldest friend, stepped forward. His piercing eyes softened when they met hers. "Mama Maggie," he said, taking her trembling hand, "tell me what happened." Within minutes, the Iron Saints Motorcycle Club, men feared by the town for their size and reputation, stood silent, unmovable, like guardians of justice. The squatters inside laughed at first, but the bikers' calm, terrifying certainty left no room for doubt. By the time the sun set that day, Margaret's home was not just reclaimed, it was restored. Broken windows replaced, doors repaired, gardens mowed, and hearts mended. She realized something incredible: the roughest men in town could also carry the kindest hearts, and the power of loyalty and love could rewrite a life overnight. Margaret Hill's hands trembled as she gripped the edges of the porch, worn boards creaking under her fragile weight. She looked up at the familiar white house with blue shutters, the home she had shared with her late husband for more than 50 years. Each brick and beam carried a memory: Robert tinkering under the hood in the garage, the smell of freshly baked bread drifting from the kitchen, laughter echoing down the hallways. But now the house was gone from her, claimed by strangers with no respect for the past she cherished. The squatters had moved in during her brief visit to her sister. 3 men and a woman, all rough in appearance and brazen in attitude, had smashed their way inside and refused to leave. When she had returned, pleading, the door slammed in her face. "Grandma, get lost," one of them sneered, smirking as if daring her to do anything about it. Tears streamed down her cheeks as she sat on the park bench across the street that night, clutching Robert's photo to her chest. She could see their silhouettes moving through the windows, the laughter inside her living room, a sound that once brought joy, now twisted into cruelty. The world seemed cruel and cold. The police, though sympathetic, offered little help. "They have rights too," one officer said awkwardly, avoiding her gaze. She had lost so much already. Robert had passed 5 years ago, leaving behind an empty house and an aching void in her heart. He had been a respected mechanic, a man known across Willow Creek for his skill and kindness. His friends, including the notorious Iron Saints Motorcycle Club, often came to him for advice, repair work, or simply companionship. Margaret had always been kind to them: cookies, lemonade, a warm smile, and they had affectionately called her Mama Maggie. She had been a part of their lives, in small but meaningful ways. The next morning, as she sat quietly crying, a deep rumble filled the air. The unmistakable growl of motorcycle engines approached, a sound that made her heart leap. 6 gleaming motorcycles rolled down the street, chrome catching the sunlight. Neighbors peeked nervously through curtains, whispering behind closed doors. From the lead bike dismounted a tall man with a gray beard, piercing eyes, and a leather vest that read, "President, Iron Saints MC." Jack "Bear" Dalton had been one of Robert's oldest friends. His presence was commanding yet gentle, like a lion ready to protect his territory. Bear knelt before Margaret, taking her trembling hand in his. "Mama Maggie," he said softly, "what happened?" Through tears, she told him everything. The bikers behind him listened, silent but tense, fury glinting in their eyes. Bear rose, his shadow stretching across the lawn, and turned toward the house. One of the squatters, a muscular man with tattoos, watched from the window, smirking. Bear cracked his knuckles. "Boys," he said quietly, "let's go have a talk." They approached the house with measured steps, calm yet terrifying in their certainty. Bear knocked once, then spoke loud enough for all to hear, "This house belongs to Margaret Hill. You've got 10 minutes to pack up and leave. We're not here to hurt anyone, but you will respect this woman, and you will walk away." Inside, the squatters shouted back, cursing, threatening to call the police. Tony Wrench Alvarez, one of Bear's men, chuckled. "Go ahead," he said, "we'll wait." But there was no escaping the unmovable wall of leather and muscle that now surrounded them. One by one, the squatters realized they were outmatched. Boxes and stolen belongings were hastily dragged out. One tried to sneak out the back, only to be met by Bear, arms crossed, an unspoken warning in his gaze. When the last intruder had fled, Bear handed Margaret the keys. "You're home, Mama Maggie," he said softly. She collapsed to her knees, clutching the keys to her chest, whispering Robert's name. Bear knelt beside her, placing a comforting hand on her shoulder. Behind them, the other bikers stood, heads bowed in quiet respect. The Iron Saints didn't stop at reclaiming the house. Over the next 2 days, they repaired broken windows, fixed the door, repainted walls, and restored the garden. A lawn was mowed, a mailbox replaced, and inside, cabinets and shelves were restocked. Margaret watched in awe, feeling as if the house, and her life, were being reborn. Evenings were filled with laughter, stories, and the smell of fresh cookies and coffee. The bikers shared memories of Robert, recalling small acts of kindness and moments of laughter. Margaret realized something profound: these men, feared by the town for their appearance, were capable of immense compassion and loyalty. A week later, Bear handed Margaret a small plaque, "Home of Mama Maggie, protected by the Iron Saints." Tears streamed down her face. "Robert would have been proud," she whispered. Bear smiled softly. "He still is, Mama. He's right here watching." That night, for the first time in years, Margaret slept peacefully, not from exhaustion, not from fear, but from the comfort of knowing she was no longer alone. Her memories, her home, and her dignity were safe, protected by men whose hearts were as strong as their fists. Outside, the motorcycles roared down the highway, a reminder that true friendship, loyalty, and courage could come from the most unexpected places. Margaret Hill had been reminded that kindness never goes unnoticed, that small acts can ripple through a lifetime, and that sometimes, help arrives when you least expect it, but precisely when you need it most.